Okay. First of all, I'd like to welcome you to Forest Park, to our nice senior center. My name is Ray Quinn. I'm the Forest Park Environmental Awareness person. And today is we're having a seminar on coyotes. I understand it is a very interesting topic and very current topic, and hopefully this seminar will give you some information on their behavior and how our behavior might dissuade them from coming into your yard. Okay? So but the key thing is to learn about this animal, because they are here. They're not as vicious as a lot of people think. They're smart as the dickens. And so hopefully Carol will tell you a little bit more about them as we go. Now, in this facility, we have restrooms in the back. If you go to the back and to the right, there are the restrooms over there, so feel free to do that if you feel the need. And today we're lucky to have a presenter that will not only do this seminar, but we have 3 other seminars this year. One will be in May, one will be in August, and the other one will be in November. Make sure that you pick up one of these before you leave. This tells you a little bit about Carol, but on the back tells you about the other 3 seminars that we will be having right here. It'll be on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. Okay, but make sure you do not leave without one of these. Okay? So, I'd like to introduce Carol. I've known her for quite a while. She was a naturalist with the Great Parks of Hamilton County for many years.
Almost 30.
Almost 30. And she's retired, but she started her own business called The Crow Knows. And so hopefully she knows a lot about the coyote. But she has spoken to a lot of different groups. After she gives her presentation, we will have a question and answer session. And the way that this will be done would be raise your hand, we will acknowledge you. If you will come to the podium where the microphone is so that the camera can pick up what the question is, and then you can sit down and then another question can come up. And then after the question and answer session, we do have those quality raffle prizes over there. Everyone should have a ticket. If not, we will check before we draw. And 7 lucky people will walk out with a door prize. Okay. So, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Carol. Carol,
Thank you. Thank you for coming out. As Wright said, this is kind of a hot topic, but my goal here today is just to give you some good education and make some really good, well thought out choices in terms of how we interact with this guy. So I'm going to be talking about how the coyote got here, what they look like, how we can decipher them different than dogs and wolves, because I think if I could look inside each one of your brains and I said coyote, your brain is actually bringing up a picture of a wolf. My husband and I were talking about this. We were brought up with the stories of the big bad wolf. So that's in your head, and something that looks slightly grizzled, gray, dog-like, your brain goes right to wolf. So we're going to work on taking care of that. All right. The best available research that's still going on, Dr. Stan Garrett from The Ohio State University started this research more than 20 years ago. And they asked him to do this research around Chicago, including areas around the airport, to look at the coyote population, how they live, how big of a litter they have, when they mate, their effect on other wildlife in the territory, and so on. And his point, if you've ever heard him lecture, he'll say, I thought it might be 1 or 2, 3 years. No, it's become a very long-term thing. And then that whole foundation, the Urban Coyote Research Project, is going on, and they trap coyotes, and they put a radio tag on them or a radio collar, and they track them throughout a season, sometimes longer than that, to see where they go, who they see, what their family life is like. And it's just amazing, that kind of research. And that really has become the gold standard. When a neighborhood or a community is working on a coyote plan, that's what they go to. They go and look at that research. The other Ohio canids that we happen to have, yes, we have coyote, but we also have gray wolf. I'm sorry, gray wolf. We don't, not anymore. We used to a long time ago. Not anymore. You have to go up to the Isle Royal, up into Minnesota. They're a gray wolf, but not in Ohio anymore. So sorry about that. Gray fox, and he's very tiny in comparison. So gray fox weighs about 12 pounds. I have a 14-pound cat, an indoor house cat. So 12 pounds, very secretive. How many in here have ever seen a gray fox? Nobody's hand? Nope. Anita, of course. If you spend much time out in the woods, especially away from urban areas, you're more likely to see them. They're very secretive and they're incredible tree climbers. They're more cat-like than canine. So we've got this little guy. And then we also have the red fox. And I'll tell you, we have a pretty good population of red fox right here in Forest Park and probably most other neighborhoods. By the way, how many are here from Forest Park, out of curiosity? All right. All right. That's wonderful. We're so glad you came and you didn't need a passport. So we're so glad you came down. So you have red fox as well. And this guy, I mean, look at the length of that. Because of the size of that tail, everybody thinks they're much larger than they really are. They top out at about 15 pounds. But your brain is seeing this animal, how long he is. They're going to be pretty low to the ground. They're very quick. They're very sneaky. They're happy to live close to your house. They might go up underneath a shed because you provide them protection. They can raise their little ones up underneath a shed that maybe a skunk or a raccoon or a groundhog had been in. And because there's humans around, there's less likely of a chance of those pups being preyed upon. And then here's the coyote. Now, people think coyotes, and sometimes you hear some really exaggerated numbers. The eastern coyote and the western coyote, a little bit different. An eastern coyote weighs about 30, 35 pounds, maybe upwards of 40. The largest one that Dr. Garrett has caught was about 42 pounds. That's still not very big when you're thinking about a wolf that may weigh 100 plus. Or if you have an Akita, and that weighs 130 pounds. So, we're very fond of our big and little dogs, aren't we? That red fox, you can see that pup was really bothering her. My husband, who was taking these photographs, was watching. She had 7 babies. She did not get a minute's rest. And if somebody went by or made a loud noise, she'd make one sound, and boom, they'd go up underneath that house. The house was empty. It's up in Lakeside, Ohio. Yeah. And so not all the cottages are full during the off-season. Okay, let's talk about a few of the facts. First of all, they are not native to Ohio. Nobody purposely brought that in. I'm going to say that a lot tonight. Every time I have one of these kinds of meetings, somebody says, I heard the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Indiana, Kentucky, whatever, brought them in to control the deer population, or the turkey population, or the rattlesnake population, fill in the blank. No, no one purposely brought coyote in. They moved in on their own. They're about 30, 36 inches, not including your tail. You're going to add about 15 to 20 inches more on that tail, so that makes them look pretty big in comparison. Height at their shoulders, about 22 inches. Weight, again, about 35 pounds, maybe a little bit more than that. Now, the average lifespan that's up there is 6 to 8 years. Think about your little doggies. How many of you have dogs at home? All right. Your buddies, we can have our buddies around with us for many years. They can live 12, 14, 15 years. The coyote, first of all, the number of coyotes that survive their first year is pretty impressive in an urban area. In a rural area, less than 20% of the pups survive. And think about that, 6 to 8 years. And most of the way that they're killed in an urban setting or suburban setting is, what would you think? Cars, hit by cars, right. Home range between 5 and 25 square miles. Now, why that big range? Because it depends on where you put the grid. If it's an urban, a suburban area, they need less space because they have everything they need and there's no hunters. They can go to the dumpster. They're not eating the leftover chicken and hamburgers. They're eating the rats and the raccoons that come to the dumpster. So if they can catch more food, they can have bigger families. Mating season is January to March. So we've just about finished that. And pretty soon the pups will be born, about 63 days after breeding season. But during this breeding season, things are kind of tenuous. There's a lot of moving around. You might have what they call transient coyotes that got pushed out of a parent's territory and they're seeking, it's like young adolescents. You cut the apron strings and they're out on their own and they make mistakes and they get into trouble. And that's what happens with these young adolescent coyotes. They go into a territory not knowing that somebody else lives there, and they are trespassing. So there could be some conflict going on. This is also the time when a transient coyote is out and they're exploring and they're testing their skills. So that could mean that if you have a cat, a small dog out in the backyard, if you have too many rabbits in your garden, they may come and go for those kinds of things. The other thing that can happen is when that female coyote is in season, she's putting off a scent that gets not just coyotes, but dogs may be affected by that as well. It's that love potion number 9. It's in the air. And the males especially have their hackles up. They're a little more ready to fight. They're ready to rumble. Even though they're not really thinking about this is a coyote and I'm a dog, all they know is they smell a female that's in season. So that's part of that effect that's going on. Once the pups are born, both parents are going to be protecting that litter site, that denning site, and so that can be another issue where there could be some conflict. Where did they come from? Well, they came into Ohio, and we'll see this in the next slide. Around 1919, 1920 was the first recorded sighting. My guess is they'd probably been in the state prior to that. Finally, somebody wrote it down and talked to a game warden and said, hey, you're not going to believe what I saw on the farm today, a coyote. There are western species that has been pushed more eastward, and in this next slide it'll make sense. Again, no agency brought them into Ohio for release. If we look at this map and look at the way that progression is, that dark green is where the coyote was before 1700. And you look at how they were being pushed to the east, and remember what else was going on at this time. In the 1800s, 1900s, we have many more people going western. So as people encroach on that coyote's territory, they're being pushed out. And as they move, they have a direct route across towards the Great Lakes and into Canada and down to the south. And what they found with those that went up towards the Great Lakes and back down into, say, Michigan and Ohio, they have a little bit more wolf DNA than some of the true western coyote. So our coyotes are a little bit bigger than what they have out west. On any given day, you'll notice that the black on the screen is the high population, but on any given day, I think that's throwing a dart at a map to say what's high, what's low, how many coyotes. If you ask any wildlife officer, any Department of Natural Resources person, how many coyotes are in the state of Ohio, they're going to go, because the only data that they have is either through roadkill or if a trapper is legally trapping them, using them for pelts, or if a hunter has taken one while they were out hunting. Again, how many coyotes in Ohio? No official count. But just to give you an idea, that survey that was going on, the research down in Chicago, in downtown Chicago, they were looking at more than 2,000 just in downtown Chicago. And you think, well, how can they survive? As Wright said at the beginning, they are just incredibly clever. And what Dr. Gart has seen from studying hours and hours and hours of traffic cam is they have learned to watch the traffic light and the do not walk sign. Hey, it works for us most of the time. They have learned to become more nocturnal and less crepuscular or active in the daylight. They changed to be around us because that means there's less conflict. If they're out at night, there's not as many humans in some areas, good places to hide. As long as they know how to cross the light when it says walk, they're fine. So they have been able to predict that and find a way to make it in Ohio. A little bit of canine comparison. So if you look at a Siberian Husky compared to a wolf, remember that wolf is in your brain and it's huge. The coyote's the next one down. Look at the body position and look at the position of the tail. That's another thing that you'll know if you have come across. It's one of those, you're looking at this animal, you say, is it a dog? Is it a coyote? The position of that tail is usually in that lower, it's hanging down. The only time it may come up is when he greets a friend. It doesn't hang down like the wolf's tail against his body. It's out just a little bit. And then here's a Chihuahua. Put you some good comparison going on there. So that wolf, the gray wolf comes in between 80 and 120 pounds. The paw size, think about that, about 4 inches across. So generally, on ladies especially, this part is about 4 inches compared to coyote, which is about 2.5. One thing that really stands out for me is the way that this part of their forearm looks so long and so slender. This coyote, which looks very thin, I would guess it to be a youngster, is up at, Jim, this is up at Gilmore Ponds, right? Yes. Yeah. But look, he's probably got the summer coat on. The pelt that I have over there is winter. Generally, when a person is trapping for money, they're trapping animals in their winter coat because it's a much more lush coat. And that looks like a youngster just because of the shape and the lack of girth on his body. Look at those very pointy ears and a very pointy muzzle in comparison to dogs and to wolf. I know I'm throwing a lot of repeats at you, but I really want to try and get that into your brain so you can make some sense of it. When you look at the way those ears are, again, the ear on the coyote is very pointy and furry in comparison. Looking at the shape of that, so here's the tail is generally down. And the shape of that paw print, do you see the toenails? So anything that's in the canine family is going to have the toenails showing, where if it's a cat, those toenails are retractable. So you're just going to have little pads. And when a coyote walks, I think we'll see that in a minute, but they walk in such a way that the front foot goes forward and the matching back foot comes up and goes almost directly into that same track. It's called direct register or close to direct register. The back paw is slightly smaller. And look at the head bones. If you look at the shape of that coyote, and there's one up here on the table. So this is a pretty typical size. That, when you think about something that size, and maybe it's not as scary as you're thinking about that big bad wolf. Yes, they have canines. They are meat eaters. They're opportunists. But they have this really interesting ridge. It's almost like the bone was pinched and you can feel that. And that's very different than on a domestic dog. Even the wolf doesn't have that kind of crest. Look at the eye orbits, where the eyes go. That means that has a large eye because they're utilizing a lot of nighttime. They're drawing in that light. They have much better visibility or visual field than you and I do at night. I know this is an old slide, and Anita will know that I've said this before, and I'm sure this picture is rather nostalgic if you loved your BlackBerry. But it's really a great picture to give you an idea. Most of our phones these days are just slightly bigger than that. But to give you an idea on that soft soil, if you were out walking, it might be hard to tell in an urban community whether it was dog or it was coyote. You'd really have to do your homework, get your nature detective hat on, and study those footprints for a while. And you can see on this picture how that line of the front foot is being followed with the back foot coming right up to it. Dogs' paws tend to spread a little bit more. Coyotes are a little more compact when they walk. Now, this is one of the hardest questions. People maybe not want to hear the answer to some of this. What's on the menu? How do they hunt? Mostly it's small mammals. So rodents, that includes rats, mice, field mice, lemmings, meadow mice, voles, shrews, whatever they can get. Obviously, it's going to take a few more voles and shrews compared to, say, a nice fat rabbit if they can get that. Yes, whitetail fawn are on the list. And I've heard from hunters who complain that coyote are eating all of the deer. In the state of Ohio, we have almost 800,000 deer. And any given year during hunting seasons, we only take out about 192,000. They are reproducing at the rate where they're having 2, 3, or 4 per year. The mortality on fawns is really high, even before coyote was part of the picture. Only 35 to 50% of fawns make it to their first birthday. And there's a lot going on. Everybody wants to eat a little 5-pound fawn if they can, but there's a lot of things that go on. But coyote will also eat waterfowl eggs. And what Dr. Gertz says is they're doing a good thing for us. Have you been complaining about Canada geese? Well, the coyote's helping with that. They found that around the Midway Airport in Chicago that one of their main sources of food was raiding Canada goose nests. And they will take all of them. They don't eat them all at once. They'll eat a couple, then they'll go and bury them and save them for later. And because they can eat anything, they can live anywhere. So eggs are on that list, of course. Fruit and vegetables, whether it's your compost pile, rotting fruit that's left on trees, they're able to eat that. Human-related food is really low on the list. And often what happens, as I said before, they are drawn into the dumpster, not that they're eating the chicken bones. They might if they need to, but they are more interested in those very fat rats or raccoons that come into the dumpster. Yes, cats happen to be on that list, and that does happen, and so do small dogs. And part of that is a couple of reasons. So coyote wants to be the top dog. There was wolf in Ohio. They were the top of the heap. We wiped them out. There's no native wolves left in the state of Ohio. We don't have any cougars left. We have a few bobcat coming back, and we have a few bear. Now there's this big open span, and coyote is filling that niche. But he wants to be the top of the heap. So he's going to go after any of the other perceived predators, and that includes raccoons, that includes some dogs, and some cats. So it's not so much that they're actually eating them, consuming them. They will because they're opportunists, but it's really more about taking out the competition. And those other animals are seen as competition. And livestock happens to be on there. In some areas of the state, there may be a problem. I would say that they probably have more of a problem with packs of feral dogs taking out sheep. Lambing season is really treacherous. And that is more likely an issue is these packs of feral dogs that are out there rather than big groups of coyotes. And they don't live in big groups anyway. They happen to be in a family group. It's a little different than, say, the pack of wolves you think of as Yellowstone. A family group of coyote might be a male and female, so you have the alpha like they do in the wolf group, but it's likely that it is the family they created the year before or the year before, and then 1 or 2 male or female that have been allowed to join in. You got to stir up that gene pool a little bit. And those youngsters stay and they help babysit and watch over the young when mom and dad are out looking for food. And that's going to be happening soon. So we'll have pups soon. Both male and female will help feed. And that means they're out seeking food. Somebody's going to watch the kids. Okay, leave it with the teenagers. Babysitting, exactly. The other picture, which you may not be able to see too well, next to the pen is coyote scat. That's a polite way of saying coyote poop. So coyote poop, coyote scat, fox scat, it all looks very similar because these animals eat a lot of animals that already have fur. And so when they're making those deposits, there's a lot of fur that will end up in a weird twist. And if you spend much time with a naturalist, you get into these discussions about what poop looks like to know which animal left it behind. If you look at dog poop, first of all, it smells to high heaven. And it usually has lots of grain in it. And it may have other oils, like it could have fish oils or that kind of thing, but it really does, it smells really bad compared to theirs. But sometimes they will leave, the coyote or the fox will leave that on a clump of grass. It's a lot like the dog at the fire hydrant. And so they'll cock their little hiney and put that down there, and there's all those lovely smells, so the next fox or coyote comes by and says, oh, look, Bob's been here. It's their calling card. As I said, coyotes are really opportunists, and that's why they do so well in an urban environment. What we're looking at here is a coyote. You know, he's got a collar on. He's a radio tag animal. This is out in Yellowstone. Jim was taking these pictures of this coyote who'd found flattened ground squirrels. He didn't even have to work. All he had to do was wait for the car to leave. The cars go by, and man, and they zip around. The squirrel gets flattened. The coyote comes in. He has a nice meal, and then he makes a comment about it. You notice he has his back leg up. I imagine you can guess what he's doing. He's peeing, yeah. So he's letting everybody know that he'd been there and how successful he was. Maybe it's gotten a 3-star rating at that restaurant. Sometimes when you're living in an urban environment, you do get into trouble. And it often happens with those youngsters, those adolescents that get pushed out of the territory, usually at the end of summer and into that first winter, where they haven't decided, should I stay back home? Should I go to another neighborhood? A door flings open at Quiznos, you run in for a bite. You know, you get on a bus. Years ago, I was at a wildlife rehab conference, and there was a picture of a coyote on a bus, taking refuge on a bus. And at that point, this is many years ago, they had hardly any coyotes in Toronto. So Daisy, the coyote, was taken in by wildlife rehab, and they raised funds to get her well again. The coyote in the center is in the downtown convention center. Imagine that, like our convention center. In the bathroom, somebody said the last time, well, maybe he needed to wash his hands. Well, how did he end up in there? My guess is this is a youngster. He's down around, you know, those areas on the backside, the loading docks. There's lots of garbage. There's lots of coming, going. The big doors are always open. Maybe he's checking out the garbage, looking for a rat. A door's open, somebody makes a noise, and he goes left instead of right. And he finds the first quiet place. I just wonder about the person who happened to open the door and find that sitting in there. And then that coyote in Lincoln Park, if you're all familiar with Chicago, up there next to the lake, and you were to follow Lakeshore Drive, Lincoln Park is very close to that. And it's a lot like you taking a walk in Winton Woods. There's a lot of people around. And so here's a coyote that's underneath a shrub, just enjoying the day. You notice that coyote's just laying low, like you don't see me. If I don't move, you won't see me. And they are pretty well camouflaged if you think about it. Sometimes they make bad choices. So this was up in Alberta. A lady's traveling into the city for work. She hits this coyote because there's too many cars around. She can't get out of the way, hits the coyote, keeps on moving, sure that she's killed it. She's in town at a stoplight, and a construction worker basically knocks on the door and says, do you know there's a coyote in your... And it's still alive. So it traveled that way for about 20 miles. I don't know what became of the coyote, but can you imagine the stories he was telling if he did happen to get home? Coyotes are going to be looking for den sites. Mama has probably already sized up a few already. She may take a den site that was used by a skunk or a raccoon or a groundhog. Groundhogs are some of their favorites. The problem for you is, you know, if they're getting up underneath your patio, that may cause that slab to fall. That's never good. But look at how secure that is. And it goes much further in than you might expect. And if you were to find a small hole like that, it's about this big. You would not suspect that that would be a spot where coyotes would be able to get in and out, and yet she does. They have a number of different dens, and she switches them out. Most wildlife do have more than one den, and that's a means of protection so that, for instance, in the case of squirrels, if that great big ball up in the tree gets too wet or blown down, she can grab the babies and take them into the nest that she's created inside the tree. And so the same thing with coyote, but she might need to change for other reasons. Maybe the first den has too many fleas. Maybe there's too much traffic going on. Maybe there's too many dogs in the yard. And she will go in different years in different places, and then if she is disturbed, she'll pick up the pups and move them to the new location. In a way, that's also protection. That way, should there be another predator, and once in a while, something will take a coyote pup that's been left unattended. I mean, she did leave them in the care of the teenagers, so something was bound to go wrong. But in the case where a small pup is out, a great horned owl can get a very young pup, another coyote, dogs, they can wander out and get struck by a car. I get a lot of questions about how to keep the coyote out of your yard, and I'm not sure that there's an absolute positive answer because they're such opportunists and very good climbers. The device that's on this picture on this side is called a coyote roller. But look at this. So this is a 6-foot wooden fence. If you call me and say that you have a chain link fence that's 4 or 5 feet in the back of your yard, I've seen turtles go over that, so it's not going to be an issue. But I get calls like that. Well, how did it get in my yard? My yard is fenced. It's wildlife. They find a way. Groundhogs can climb trees. People don't believe you when you say that. So coyote has this way, and what's really interesting is this device that's at the top of that fence was originally designed to keep dogs out. And Malamutes, and especially Malamutes, are escape artists, and they will try and try and try. And it's amazing, if they can just get one good leap and get their toenails up there, they can bring the rest of their body. I mean, you know a cat can do that, they're so agile. But the coyotes the same way. Once in a while they do get caught, and I've looked at many pictures of coyotes making bad choices where they're stuck in between a fence, so one half here and one half on the back. This device has, now this one would not work. This is a homemade one, and it would not work because the animal could get his toenails on the top of that wood and pull themselves up. But the one above that, that roller device has a steel cable in the center, and it has another metal or PVC pipe underneath the larger one. Coyote Roller's happy to sell you their brand, which also has some little ridges on it, so that when their toenails go for it, it causes it to spin, and they fall back. And so if you have a dog that's an escape artist, that might be something to consider. But is that an absolute no? I mean, they can also dig. They can also learn when a fence or a gate is left open. They're very understanding and we're predictable. There she is, it's 8:02, she's going out to feed the birds. At 8:05, she's going to go back in, close the door. I have the yard to myself. And so one of the ways you can discourage some of that is learning to understand how you can be around coyotes and take a little bit more of a stance of not making them comfortable in your own yard. So we talk about hazing, and hazing means you are fussing. You're yelling and screaming and telling them to go away. There are some funny videos where they actually say, "Coyote, go away," as if the coyote knows his name. It's really important to be brave, but to be loud. And ladies especially, what happens when we get upset? Our voice gets really high, and we sound like a mouse, which is something a coyote would be interested in. So we have to make our voice come down in register. You have to lower your voice. And if you can't do that, find some help. Make some other noise. A simple can, pennies or beans that could go in there. You can keep some Mylar. This is from a box of crackers. You can make a big noise. You can use one of those horns like you take to the football game, except you'll probably give yourself a heart attack when you press the button. This one is one of my favorites, and I would also advise this for dog workers, a good large umbrella. And I'm going to tempt fate, and I hope you're not too superstitious. But when you have a large umbrella, this one is green and white, and I would encourage you to use an umbrella that has 2 colors, white and black, white and red, white and green, because wildlife see those as warning colors. I mean, look at the skunk. He's trying to tell us black and white means trouble. So a nice big umbrella, because Coyote says, there she is, she's coming out to feed the bird feeder. I'll have the yard here in about 5 minutes. If I walk out and I do this, now, not only am I 5 feet tall, I'm about 5 feet wide, and I'm full of warning colors. I also like that really nice pop. And so that's unpredictable. And that's what you're trying to do, is catch that coyote or the neighbor's dog that's in your yard again, or the deer, or whatever it is you're trying to scare. You're trying to get them off of that predictable cycle. And so some of those other things, shake it up a little bit. Even to go so far, I mean, I don't carry mace. I don't walk around with a can of Glade, but something like this, if you had it and you sprayed it, enough of it, that scent is going to be out there, and that's very different than something they're used to. So you could certainly use that. But those are all things that you can do. You can throw sticks or rocks. You're not trying to hit it. You're just, you're making noise and you're throwing it at the coyote and yell, go away, coyote. Stand your ground. Again, make yourself big. That's the part about being brave. I'm about 5'3". You need to make yourself big. So that might mean that I would open my sweater or jacket to make myself look even bigger, puff myself up as big as I can. You can stomp your feet, because deer do that kind of thing and they put out a warning. The other animals can actually feel some of that vibration. The other things to keep them from learning of your habits is to don't feed coyote. So don't store the pet food outside. If you're feeding your pet outside, when they're finished, bring it in. I know that's really hard if you have a pet. I understand. Seal the garbage cans. Now, coyote will get into the garbage, but they have to be really desperate to bother with that, because it's so much easier to eat the mice that come to the bottom of the bird feeder, or maybe the raccoon that got into the compost pile, than to bother with the garbage can. Raccoon, you know, he can get into that garbage can. Pet safety. Number one, make sure your pets have their vaccinations, that you're always up to date. And I would say that regardless of what other kind of wildlife we're talking about. While you're walking your dog on a leash, supervise them closely. If you have the leash in your hand and your dog is over there, they're not under your control. And I don't care if you tell me this dog is so well behaved and so well trained, it would not hurt a flea, until it does. And I'm more worried about some dogs off a leash than I would be a coyote, actually. But if you're walking with your dog, and I would think you would do that just out of courtesy to the other dog walker or people coming, you want that dog close to you, so that there's less likely of a chance for conflict. If the coyote is coming and you have your dog under control, there's less likely to be a problem. That's where you're going to be making big noises. Do not let your dog have contact with that coyote. Go back to shaking that can with pennies or whatever kind of noise you need to make. If you have a small dog, I'd say anything under 20 pounds, 25 pounds, pick that dog up. And in some cases, you might have to do that when you are being approached by another large dog. A lot of these small dogs, and I was talking to, who was walking their grand dog? Yeah, there we go. And she has a little guy. And so those little guys, they think they're the size of a bull mastiff. You know, they might be 5 pounds, 10 pounds, but man, they're ready to take on a Rottweiler when they go out for a walk. And so they might feel more aggressive towards the coyote, again, because their ego is huge. And you don't want to encourage that coyote to come any closer. So if you have a small dog, make sure you pick them up. Don't let your dog interact. Of course, keep your pets indoors at night. If you have a really small dog, I love Chihuahuas. I think Yorkies are wonderful. A little 5-pound ball of fluff with those little cute eyes are just amazing. But if that's your baby, you're not going to let your baby go out in the backyard by themselves. So do that. Go out with them, or perhaps you build an area that you can control, like an outdoor kennel that is wired over, so you don't have a chance like that. I know you don't want to go out in your bathrobe and your rubber boots when it's raining, and neither does Fido, for that matter. But if they're that tiny, then they need a little more assistance to be outside. And don't let cats wander freely. It always amazes me that people will, and you're not going to like this part, but the idea that they will allow their cats to go outside and then complain when they're hit by a car, attacked by a dog or a coyote or whatever, and yet you put them out there willy-nilly. And Coyote has moved in on his own. He is native to the United States. Cats were brought over. I love cats. I have 2 amazing, wonderful cats. They're my buddies, and they're also indoor cats. I know they love to watch the birds, but I'm not going to put them out there because even if they are vaccinated and they have been neutered and they're outside, they still are catching birds and fighting with other cats. So that part doesn't stop. And a cat fight can actually encourage a coyote to come in because that sound is very maniacal. It gets kind of higher and higher. And same thing, if dogs get into a fight among themselves or start barking and it gets higher, the coyote may come in to investigate and see if it's some situation he can take advantage of. If there is an aggressive coyote, and this is a coyote that is walking way too close to you, growling, or if there are more than one that are coming in, that's the time for you to make contact with your law enforcement or the Department of Natural Resources. And again, be prepared. Go out with either some type of a stick, your walking stick. I mean, some people walk with a golf club because that's their shillelagh should they need to use it. That mace spray, but be aware that if you're out walking and that occurs, that's the coyote. If they're aggressively coming in, that's the coyote that really needs our attention. The others do not want anything to do with you. They would just want to live their life and eat the extra rabbits and the extra rats that are around. We always need to be aware that we have these kinds of predators in our neighborhoods. Honestly, I think I'd be more afraid of a raccoon. I've encountered some hefty raccoons in my life, and they can be pretty ridiculously crazy. Do your homework. Read the good research. Just because it's on the internet doesn't make it true. So go and look at the research of people who've been doing this for years and years and years to understand the behavior of these animals. Follow the Department of Natural Resources reports on these predators. In fact, I brought, there's a copy here. This is Mammals of Ohio. And you're permitted to have one of these. These come from the Department of Natural Resources. It has lots of other things in it besides just the coyote, but it also has the 2 different fox that are in there. So you can have a copy of that. And then this is, I didn't bring any more of these, but this is the hunting and trapping regulations. In the state of Ohio, coyote, because it was not native to this area, has an open season. Yes, they can be taken out. But can you hunt in the city of Forest Park? No. And believe me, the law enforcement's going to be at your door, Did you just charge a firearm? So don't do that to yourself. If you have an issue, make a report before you take some of that other kinds of action. And lastly, if you absolutely need to have an animal trapped out, the Department of Natural Resources has a list of certified and permitted wildlife nuisance agents. They're trappers. That's what they do, whether it's the raccoon stuck in the chimney or the coyote stuck in a fence or the skunk up underneath your house, that they can do that. Yes, there is a fee for that, but you know that that person has been trained and they're following the laws of the state of Ohio. Make sure you share the correct information with your neighbors. So I hope that this is a good starting point for you to do that. And you can certainly find more information by calling the Department of Natural Resources, and that's the number up there, 1-800-WILDLIFE. It's really easy to remember. All right. We got one more thing. In case you're wondering, all those years where Coyote was chasing the Roadrunner, who would win? Well, let's see. Coyote tops out at about 40 miles per hour at a flat run. Roadrunner can go about 25 miles per hour in a very quick sprint, but he can also fly. So yes, Coyote would eat the Roadrunner if he can catch him, but there's a lot more things. And in fact, it's amazing that poor Coyote in all those cartoons probably would have starved to death if he wasn't getting hit by an anvil, because he could have been eating rats and mice. All right, so now's that chance for you to ask those questions. And as Wright mentioned, if you have a question, we're going to ask you to come up to the podium. That way everybody can hear the question, and I have a mic on so that we can hear the answer. Ready to come up?
Gotta get this ready.
Okay.
Is this good?
Yeah, you're taller than me.
Yeah.
Okay, quick question, because I'm a dog trainer.
All right.
So have you heard of coyote vests, and do they work?
Coyote vests, yes, I have seen them. And for the audience, a coyote vest looks like almost a flotation device, but it may have prickles and stickers and all kinds of things that a coyote wouldn't want to bite through. I think some of them go so far as to be made out of Kevlar. Now, it doesn't protect the dog completely. It's not like an Iron Man suit. And I don't know, I mean, it seems like they're pretty costly. So I don't know about that.
You don't know if they're actually effective?
I don't know if they're really effective.
Okay, what about like a personal alarm? As a dog trainer, I've used a personal alarm before where you pull it and it lights and sounds and it's incredibly
One that you're
loud.
carrying?
Yes.
Yes. So this personal alarm device that she's talking about, I've seen those in used in many other ways. They were sold, I think, originally for if you're traveling, you might carry them on you or hang them in your hotel room, and you pull one, it's like a pin. You pull the pin out, and it sounds like the alarm on this building. Wee, wee, it makes some really crazy noise. Some of them have lights flashing, and they're pretty inexpensive now. So that would be an easy one to carry. And some of them have a clip, so you can put them on the back of your belt or the back of your pants. Or if you've got your dog with you, you can clip it onto the line. But yeah, I think that's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then last question, do coyotes live in groups?
Coyotes do live in groups. Usually it's a small family group. It might be 4, 5, 6, and it changes out a little bit. There's a lot of competition, and after a couple years, mama's not the alpha anymore. So she passes away, and maybe a daughter move up into that spot. But they're not giant packs like you might see the wolves of Yellowstone.
Okay.
They're more family groups. Great questions.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
First of all, I can speak from personal experience about viewing coyotes. We have several in the green space behind our yard,
Okay.
and one night there was one at dusk up against the woods. You could barely see him. It was unbelievable how he was almost not there. But my first question is, I know somebody who liked to jog in the morning before dark, and she saw a group of 3 in the yard next to our house.
Okay.
Would that be a dangerous situation?
I think it's more of an awareness situation. So if you see 3 together, in my brain, I'd probably be thinking, okay, this is maybe mom and 2 pups or 3 young adolescents. Mm-hmm. And I would certainly be aware, because there's more than one. If they're in a yard, they're pretty close to the house, which is pretty bold.
Yes.
And at that point, I might change my stance from running to some heavy walking with big footfalls.
No, I would change my stance to going back into the house.
Yeah, but again, making yourself, if you're running, and in these days, so often when people are out running, they have earbuds in, which means they're not paying attention to anything else, whether it's a coyote, a dog, a car, whatever. But you really need to be aware, especially if you're running before it's fully light or after dark.
Exactly.
Right, and I would say that's just one of those things where I would stop and walk myself out of that situation.
Yes, okay.
And maybe one of those personal alarms that we were just talking about, she could carry that. And if they were too close, you pull that. Of course, the whole neighborhood's going to light up. They'd be right on top, the neighborhoods would be right on top of her to say, what's going on?
And you mentioned that they're in groups. I mean,
Family groups, small
yeah.
family groups.
yeah, there have been nights where we've had our windows open, like in the summertime, and there's an emergency somewhere, and there's sirens going off, and
It sounds like hundreds.
the howlings.
Yes. And I really,
raised goosebumps.
I'm really glad you brought that up because coyotes have a way of making these really interesting layers of sound.
Oh my
So
God,
3 or 4 or 6 coyotes can sound like 25. And yes, the hair on the back of your neck's going to come up because a howl is a howl, whether it's a coyote or a wolf, your brain's going back to that. It's almost like primal in your brain. So when they layer that sound, that's really a good way. If you're a small group and you make a lot of noise, you're less likely to be attacked by some other creature. So they want to sound like they're bigger than they are. I'm really glad you brought that up, but yeah.
And one more
All right.
question. You said there are no wolves in Ohio?
No wolves native.
Okay.
Now, people do get pets they should not, and on the dark web, you can have a cougar in your one-bedroom apartment.
The only reason I ask is because I had my dogs out for a walk one day, and the Forest Park Police came by and said, you may want to go take your dogs home because there have been wolves sighted in your neighborhood. I'm like, you mean coyotes, right? And they're like, no, wolves. And I said, okay, you might want to go talk to those people because their little dog is outside right now.
Right, and that would be something I'd be really curious to get some eyeballs on that
This was
creature.
like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
And once in a while, like I said, somebody will have an animal that is a mixed breed, and they get tired of it, and they let it go. I mean, we live next to all this green space. Having worked for the parks, we could talk for hours about the types of animals that get dumped at the park. So it's possible that some type of unusual mix got loose, but
okay.
I'd like to lay
I'm
eyeballs
just
on
telling you
that
what
one.
the police
Yeah.
told me.
Right, well, probably a wise thing to go home at that point.
Oh, I did.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
Curiosity, you mentioned when wolves came down through Canada, there was some wolf DNA.
When the coyote came across to the east, yes, there's some more wolf DNA.
That a sign of inbreeding? I mean, crossbreeding?
It is.
Okay.
It is. So as I said, at some point, a canine is a canine is a canine. And a coyote can mix, they can breed with a dog, and they can breed with a wolf. And in some cases that happens, and so what they have found is that the eastern, what we consider the eastern coyote, has a little bit more wolf DNA than the group that went down across the south part of the United States.
Okay. And occasionally, I will watch my son's little dog, and I've put a light outside in the front. And when she has to go out, I try to keep her in the light. Is there something else I should be doing?
Yes, going out with her.
I do that.
Absolutely.
I do that.
And actually, if you can keep them on the leash while they go out and have some noisemaker in the other hand, I would certainly do that. Like I said, nobody likes to go out in their pajamas when it's 20 degrees, but that's your little buddy.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Oops, you dropped something.
Oh, I want to keep that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? Your brains are full at this point. All right. Well, if
I'm sorry, I have one more.
one more, all right.
I'm sorry. We have, is there a determined length that coyotes can jump over fences? We have a 5-foot fence around our yard. I'm serious.
It's a very good question. Well, they won't necessarily jump it and clear it, but they will jump and get as high up as they can and climb.
Okay.
So 5 foot is not going to stop them. It may slow them down, but it will not absolutely deter them.
Okay, so we would really need to watch them, especially like if we let them out early in the morning before it's light.
Correct.
Or at night.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Sorry. Yeah. One more question back here. Can you reach that? All right.
I don't really have a question. I just want to thank you for debunking, or whatever you want to call it, debunking all of the myths that are being passed around on Nextdoor. I am tired of hearing it. And I wish you would have been in Fairfield.
I've been following that on the news, and it is,
I wish you would have been in Fairfield. You were very informative, and I applaud you for that.
thank you, I appreciate that. All right, well, there are some items on the table that we mentioned in case you were late coming. Oh, we got one more question? We'll do one more. Just stay right there. You're getting your steps in.
My question was kind of related to that. Yes. And I just
Don't be so quick to give stuff away.
just real quick, with Fairfield doing a management plan, and I'm not sure what that's involved yet, I'm not sure whether or not that's been determined, but I know they're concerned about the coyotes taking over their population. I'm not sure now we can answer this question tonight, but does that push them over to Forest Park? And should we be doing together some type of management plan like Springdale, Forest Park, and Fairfield?
Yeah, excellent question. Well, as each community comes up with a management plan, the ones that I've been seeing are pretty well overlaying, and that comes back to watching your animals when you take them out, taking up the pet food, and to go through this hazing technique. There's very few cases. You can't kill all of them. We don't want to. They're filling a niche. I mean, they're reducing the raccoon population. And in urban areas, we have a higher raccoon population than they do out in rural areas. So they have a job to fill. They really don't want to be interrupting our daily lives. But sometimes, I mean, it's just like any other neighbor. Sometimes there are conflicts. And so the plans that have come from other communities the best ones are laid in with the research from Dr. Stan Garrett and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, which come back to hazing and really being aware of your surroundings and dedicated care for small pets when they're outside. The likelihood of a coyote attacking a person is extremely small. The case where an animal has bitten somebody is so small. I mean, we're talking about less than 10,000 in the whole United States in a year. And I want to preface that by saying there are 4.5 million dog bites per year. 4.5 million dog bites per year. And of that, between 30 and 50,000 are so serious they require medical attention. So the fact that once in a while there's a coyote that is so far out of, if you have one that's that aggressive, that's when action needs to be taken. But there's no way that we can get rid of all of them. And I don't think that if they can't put enough pressure on, there's just not a way. But I think having this awareness, having meetings like this, where we understand the responsibility is for us, just like any other wildlife that we have around, which again goes back to policing up your property, making sure your area is safe, watching your pets, and just being responsible for what else is out there. Really great question. Yeah, thank you. All right, wait a minute. We got one more right. He's so anxious to give something away.
I have a fence that's 3.5 feet.
A fence that's 3.5 feet?
Yeah, I have a dog, 45 pounds. She's always outside. I need a permission from him to get a trap, or I got to go help myself and buy it and put it in my backyard.
A trap for what?
Get to that animal.
And what will you do when you catch it?
And the catching it, just put it in the dumpster.
When you borrow a trap, whether it's from Forest Park or from some other agency, or you go to the pet store or whatever and you buy one, you are still required to follow the correct and humane ways. If you capture an animal, you can't take it out someplace and let it go. That's illegal.
That's my question.
That means you have the responsibility of humanely euthanizing that animal and proper disposal.
Oh, really?
You have and we're talking about humane euthanasia.
So you're going to let him kill me, eat me, and should I
No,
defend myself?
that's not what we're saying at all. We're saying if you truly have an aggressive animal, that's when you talk to law enforcement and you make contact with a trapper who is already bound by the laws of the state of Ohio, will trap them and humanely put that animal down.
I can call this that for
You can't. There's going to be a fee. But if you do it You have to follow the same rules.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that's a lot to think about, and you're probably going to be thinking about it a lot over the next few days or so. If you have questions, I think my information's up here. You can send me an email, and I'll do my best. It's really about getting the right information out there. It is a hard topic to cover, so I appreciate your attention.
So thank you for coming. We hope to see you at the next environmental seminar. And tell your friends, we're going to get a link. It's going to be shown on Waycross Community Media. So look and see when they're going to show it, and I will send it out on email, the link. So tell your friends, if you've got friends who want to see it, forward that to them. So thank you for coming. Have a good evening.